Could it truly be? Could a majestic lion, after 2 decades, recall a single human face out of the countless it might have encountered? Could it still recognize the one person who once cradled it as a terrified, tiny cub, snatched from the jaws of a raging forest fire? Most would dismiss the notion with a laugh, but in the boundless plains of the Serengeti, an event unfolded that defied all logic, proving that love transcends the predictable. One serene evening, bathed in the soft orange glow of the setting sun, a powerful male lion padded silently through the tall grasses. No defiant roar, no predatory stance, just a quiet dignity in each measured step. Then, as if guided by an unseen thread of memory, the lion slowly, tenderly, rested his massive head on the shoulder of a woman. It was the very same woman who, so many years ago, had saved his fragile life when he was too small even to stand. This wasn't merely a reunion. It was a hushed miracle, something no one would have believed unless they witnessed it firsthand. And for anyone who has ever cherished an animal-like family, this story resonates like a homecoming. It all began in 2005, during the brutal, unforgiving dry season of East Africa. The sun blazed over the horizon, and a relentless wind whipped dust across the parched lands of the Mikoani Wildlife Sanctuary. Back then, a young volunteer named Clara Hayes, fresh out of university at 22, had joined a small, passionate wildlife rescue project. Driven by a desire to make a tangible difference, Clara spent her days tending to orphaned animals, meticulously documenting their behaviors, and absorbing wisdom from the seasoned local conservationists. One sweltering morning, while surveying the aftermath of a recent forest fire near the sanctuary's edge, she detected a faint sound, barely a rustle, emanating from the singed brush. It was almost imperceptible, yet Clara paused, her instincts honed. She crouched low and carefully pushed aside the burnt shrubs. There, curled up and trembling, was a lion cub. His fur was matted with dirt and scorched, one tiny paw lightly burned, and his wide, wet eyes, brimming with fear, locked onto hers. The cub was too weak to move. Clara gently scooped him up, wrapped him in her loose shirt, and whispered, "It's all right now, I've got you." On the journey back to camp, she gave him a name, Kito. At the rescue station, Clara tirelessly worked day and night to nurse Kito back to health. She meticulously cleaned his wounds, fed him milk from a bottle, and wrapped him in a warm blanket every night. Slowly, he began to regain his strength. Soon, Kito became more than just a rescue. He became family. Like an oversized house cat, Kito would shadow Clara everywhere, tripping over his own clumsy paws, curling up beside her during rest breaks, and nudging his head against her knees when he sought attention. Clara never kept him caged. The rescue camp boasted a special enclosure for recovering predators, and within weeks, Kito had the run of the spacious area. But even with the freedom to roam, he always remained close to Clara. One afternoon, she left the camp for a few hours to collect supplies. Upon her return, she found Kito sitting at the main gate, unmoving. He hadn't eaten nor played. He had simply waited, his eyes glued to the forest trail, as if anticipating her return. When she stepped out of the jeep, he bolted into her arms, letting out soft, almost human-like whimpers. It was a bond that words couldn't adequately capture, and for a time, their happiness was absolute. But happiness in the wild is rarely permanent. As Kito grew older, stronger, and increasingly independent, the rescue center faced a difficult decision. He had to be returned to the wild. This was their unwavering policy with all rescued lions. "It's for his own good," they gently explained to Clara. She nodded, understanding the truth of their words, but her heart splintered within her. On the day of Kito's release, Clara walked him to the training gate herself. She knelt, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Be strong out there, my Kito. But if someday you miss me, you can always come back." Kito gazed at her for a long moment, then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the grasslands, into the wild, into the vast unknown. Years cascaded by. 10, 15, 20. Clara was no longer the spirited young volunteer with bright eyes and dirt-smudged jeans. She now lived in a small, serene coastal town with her son, Leo, a nature filmmaker who frequently journeyed across the globe to document wildlife. Clara spent her mornings on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sunrise paint the ocean. In her lap lay an old, faded photograph, a young woman beneath a tree, cradling a lion cub. That was Kito, her boy, her miracle. She had never forgotten him. One summer, Leo invited Clara to join him on a documentary trip back to Tanzania. They would be revisiting Mikoani, filming changes in the ecosystem and observing how the sanctuary had evolved. At first, Clara declined. "I'm too old for adventures now," she said with a gentle smile. But Leo insisted, "It's just a short trip, Mom. Maybe it'll bring back good memories." Something in his voice made her pause. Perhaps it was time to go back, to see the place where a piece of her heart still resided. They arrived a week later, driving across the same dusty roads Clara had once traversed on foot. The landscape was identical, dry, golden, endless, but the sanctuary itself had transformed. New facilities, more staff, improved vehicles. Their guide, a young man named Django, spoke passionately about the animals. "There's a lion here," he remarked one afternoon, "that behaves unlike any other we've seen. His name is Mshindi. He's old now, but there's something peculiar about him. He doesn't attack, he rarely roars. Once, he even pressed his head into the shoulder of a ranger. No one knows why." Clara froze, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. She gazed out the window, her eyes wide. "Kito," she whispered. Could it truly be her Kito? That same evening, the group paused near an open plain, hoping to capture shots of wildebeest migrating. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the grasslands in hues of orange and gold. Suddenly, Django raised his hand. "Look," he murmured. In the distance, a lion was approaching, slowly, deliberately. Not hunting, not threatening, just walking. As the lion drew nearer, a hush fell over everyone in the vehicle. He was massive, with a thick, dark mane and a tranquil expression. But his eyes were searching, as if seeking something or someone. Clara's breath hitched in her throat. She didn't wait. Her heart knew before her mind could catch up. Without a word, she opened the vehicle door. "Mom!" Leo exclaimed, alarmed. "It's all right," she replied, her voice steady. "I know him." She stepped down from the jeep. The wind gently rustled her hair, and the tall grass brushed against her legs like soft fingers. The lion stopped just a few meters away. Clara stood still, barely breathing. "Kito!" she called out, her voice trembling with emotion. The lion looked up. Their eyes met, and then something utterly unimaginable occurred. The lion emitted a sound, not a roar, not a growl, but a soft, aching cry, like a child who has finally found its mother after being lost for years. He took a few steps closer, then gently, reverently, he lowered his head onto her shoulder. Clara reached out with trembling fingers, running them through the familiar, thick fur of his mane. Her eyes welled with tears. The years melted away, the pain, the waiting, the wondering. It all dissolved. For a moment, they were back in the past, a girl and her cub. No one spoke, no one could. A few tourists openly wept. Django wiped his eyes. Leo captured the moment on film, his hands shaking. But Clara said nothing. She simply wrapped her arms around Kito's powerful neck, and he leaned into her, as if to say, "I remember you." Word of the reunion spread like wildfire. Rangers, researchers, wildlife organizations. At first, people dismissed it as a mere coincidence. "It's possible he recognized her scent," one biologist suggested. "Perhaps she reminded him of a caretaker from the past," another offered. But then, someone unearthed old logs from 2005. There it was, a lion cub named Kito, rescued from a fire, raised by a volunteer named Clara Hayes. The story went viral. Photographs of the elderly woman embracing a magnificent, full-grown male lion beneath the African sky touched hearts across the globe. Experts began debating lion memory. Some argued that lions could remember through profound emotional connections. Others maintained that scent played a more significant role than sight. But for Clara, no explanation was necessary. "Love doesn't follow science," she told a local reporter. "Sometimes, it just waits. And it remembers." Before she departed the sanctuary, Clara was granted one last afternoon with Kito. No cameras, no crowds, just the two of them. They sat on a large rock under the setting sun. Kito lay beside her, his head resting near her lap. Clara stroked his mane slowly, gently. "Thank you for remembering me," she whispered. Kito didn't move, but his eyes closed softly, and he pressed his head into her palm, as if to say, "I never forgot." A few days later, Clara and Leo left Tanzania. But before she went, she handed Django a letter and a photograph, her and Kito beneath the endless sky. At the bottom of the letter were 10 simple words, written in her careful handwriting. Animals don't keep photographs, but they never forget love. The story of Clara and Kito has since been recounted in classrooms, nature documentaries, and wildlife centers worldwide. It's more than just a tale of a woman and a lion. It's about a love that requires no words, that spans decades, that returns without warning but always with profound meaning. Perhaps you once saved an animal. Perhaps you've loved one more than you thought possible. And perhaps, somewhere in a forest or a field, it still remembers you, watching, waiting, hoping for one more moment to say, "I remember you." What do you think is the most remarkable aspect of Clara and Kito's reunion?